You are ready to go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I would like to call to order the 2062nd meeting of the City of College Place City Council with electronic attendance. Will the clerk take roll call?
Trying to unmute myself, sorry. Okay, Councilmember Bobbitt,
Present.
Councilmember Cleveland,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
Present.
Councilmember Nyhagen,
Present.
Councilmember Selby,
Present.
Councilmember Sherman,
Present.
Councilmember Trope,
Present.
City Attorney Colwell, City Administrator Rizzatello,
Present.
Finance Director Carlton, Public Works Director Paul Hartwig,
Here.
Police Chief Troy Tamaris,
Here.
HR Manager Sean Doring,
Here.
And Deputy Clerk Holm, and myself. We do have a quorum. We're ready to go.
All right. And for the record, we did start the meeting at 7 p.m. Will you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. And Councilmember Nyhagen, can I impose on you to say a few words to get us started?
Yes. Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful that we can come together as a council tonight to do the business of the city. We ask that you would direct us and that we would do it according to thy will. And Father, we thank you for all of our wonderful people that work for us. And we ask especially, Father, that you be with those who are suffering tonight from the virus. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you so much. Okay, it is now time for public comment. Did anyone submit a comment or arrange to speak?
No, they did not.
Okay, great, thank you. So then we're going to move on to item number 2, which is the consent agenda, which consists of approving the agenda for today, October 27th, 2020, approve council minutes from October 13th, 2020 meeting, acceptance of the state CARES grant contract amendment, youth advisory commission appointments, and the check register for and financials for September 2020. Are there any items the council would like to remove from the consent agenda at this time? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion?
I move approval of the consent agenda. This is
Great,
Councilmember Selby.
thank you. Do we have a second?
Yes, Council.
Go ahead.
Councilwoman Nyhagen, second.
Great, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The consent agenda is approved. Next on our item is a presentation. So tonight we have a presentation of the Basin Disposal Annual Report by Mr. Derek Dietrich. I'm going to turn it over to you, Derek.
Alrighty, we'll see if I can do this. Share my screen here. I don't know if it's shared actually.
No, it did not. There we go.
Did it do it? Okay, alrighty. Okay, First and foremost, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Mayor and Council, and I will kind of go through the report, and it'll follow the same format as we have in previous years. Here's the agenda. So I will give a short recap of the recycling market, and that addresses the question of what in 2018, we canceled the curbside service. And one of my obligations was to report back what's going on in the recycling world. So I'll do that. And then if you'll allow me, I'll add one more bullet below that. And then I will talk about the residential tonnage collected, residential garbage tonnage collected. And if you remember, in 2018, we created a new contract that was unlimited collection. And the discussion at that point in time was, over time, as people realize the benefits of that unlimited collection, there will probably be more tons, which will lead to more expense. And the discussion was to wait 12 months, 18 months. Well, we're well past 24 months into the third year. And I do think that things have settled down. And so I'll give a quick summary of what we're seeing on that regard. And then with that, then the residential collection rate, which is kind of the standard CPI adjustments, and then a summary of those adjustments. So that'll be the agenda, if that works for everybody. Okay, and again, I'll apologize ahead of time. A number of the council members have seen this before, but I think it's important to recap where we came from and where we are now and towards in regards to recycling. And so July, and I'll go through it fairly quickly. July 2017, China implemented new policies which were to restrict the importation of recyclable goods. 2018, they dramatically lowered the threshold of contamination to come in, which effectively shut down importation of recycled commodity into China. December 2019, by this time, the material is flooding. So China shut its door and literally they consume 50% of the world's recycle market, and it went to zero. And so you can imagine that it started to flow into other places, India being another large economy, and then they became saturated with this material. So they then started to restrict. And then July of this year, China reaffirmed through policy that they consider recycling solid waste and they don't want it. So over the span of, let's say, 3 years, there's no light at the end of the tunnel to increase consumer demand or world demand for recyclable products. So that's the recap. And I always go to a graph here. And city made the decision to cancel the curbside collection in March of 2018. And one of the factors that drove that decision was the high cost of the recyclable commodity. At that point, it was $131 per ton. And so today in October, it's gone up even more, which reflects the earlier story that there's just no demand for this material. And so from a cost point of view, you can see the green is the recycled commodity above the blue, which is disposal. And so as a comparative, if the material is disposed, it's roughly $96. So there's quite a bit of savings from that point of view. So in summary, the world market is still in flux. There's no green light to know what to do. Pricing has not come down, it's gone up. With that, I'll throw a couple other things, again, try to be real brief on it. Legislative, there's huge public demand to recycle. And so at the city level, the county level, and certainly at the state level, there's a lot of legislative activity to try to come up with an answer. I won't go into it, but it's going to take some years to sort that out and see how effective it is. So at any rate, I wish I can give you good news, but I'll just give you more uncertainty. With that, I don't know if there's any questions in regards to recycling.
Yeah, Councilmember Peterson.
Yes.
I think it was about, I don't know, and obviously this with the slowdown with the economy and whatnot, I'm sure that's playing into this also, but I think it was about a year ago or less, we were discussing that that there were some local groups or local efforts to get into the recycling to, I can't remember now if it was in the Midwest or something like that. Has that fallen, obviously from your presentation, that's not engaged and has not followed through?
Yeah, and I'm struggling to remember specifically what that topic was, but certainly that's what's happening now. You have a lot of groups trying to get in and solve the demand equation. Certainly pulp mills, manufacturers that need the raw commodity, there's no question they're retooling their plants as we speak. And if we look at the pricing at $154 per ton, candidly, if they retool their facility, they can get paid for a raw product that they otherwise have to pay for. And so that's happening, and it's going to roll out over the next number of years to try to get equilibrium on this market. Now, to your point, again, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there's a number of groups that are trying stuff, but it's not settled in to really consume enough demand yet.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And would you say that it's probably, this council member Trope, it would seem to me that as an outlying community, I'll say, the places this is going to make sense are going to have sufficient volume to make it an economic model. And places like Walla Walla Valley are probably going to be struggling to find places nearby that are going to have sufficient volume to take ours. We're going to struggle with that for a while.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. If there was a policy to be made, so first and foremost, there's less demand worldwide. Okay, that tells me that there needs to be less supply feeding into the market. And then of that reduced supply, guess what? It should be centered around the ports because this goes overseas. And so our Eastern Washington being, away from the ports, it has an extra transportation component. And so depending on how long this lasts, it certainly would stand to reason that there's less coming out of the central part of the country and this state and focus it on the ports.
I guess my point is that the places where there's sufficient volume, where the business model is more likely to make sense, are going to be densely populated areas. Assuming that there's going to be domestic sources for recycling, they're going to serve cities because there's the volume to support that. It's going to be difficult in a smaller community because you're not going to get economies of scale.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Councilmember Cleveland has his hand up.
Yeah, a couple of questions. As I understand it, at the landfill right now, there are some large containers set up for certain types of recycling, like cardboard, and I'm not entirely sure the other ones. Is there some feasibility for like a limited recycling program for some of those materials that are, sought after, like for example, aluminum cans and steel cans, and if I'm understanding correctly, cardboard? How feasible would a program that collected just those materials be for a city?
Yeah, agree with the question, and that's absolutely what needs to happen. So, excuse me. Within the spectrum of recyclable commodities, there certainly are some commodities that there is demand, there is value for it. And again, if I was king for a day, I would do exactly what you're proposing to educate the public that, aluminum cans, cardboard, certain commodities have value. Therefore, the program is going to change to only collect those commodities. And it's a transition because people just like putting a whole bunch of stuff in a can and it feels good, but that's not going to happen anymore. So absolutely, if there was a recycle program to be built, that's what I would support. Selective commodities that have demand and educate the public that it's just different now. There's less number of commodities.
Totally agree.
This is Councilmember Bobbitt. And I have been recycling. I know Walla Walla Recycling will take tin cans, aluminum cans, loose paper, and cardboard, no plastic. And I know the landfill takes the cardboard and then it's a mixed recycle with the plastic, tin cans, paper, and aluminum cans all together in one big dumpster.
Yep. And that's another solution to go directly to Walla Walla Recycling or the bin. So yes, I agree.
This is Councilmember Selby. I have a couple questions. I'm actually old enough to remember when we used to have to separate white paper and colored paper and everything had a separate bin. Is there any inkling of that people would be willing to go back to something like that? Or has the switch to mixed basically overcome that?
I would say yes, but not definitively. And it comes back to education, right? So as we've spoken before, quality matters, and the program you suggest will achieve quality. And so, again, if I was to guess, and let's assume the city wanted to go that direction, then it would be some type of an education campaign to everybody say, look, this is where we're going. This is why we're doing it. It's going to feel different, but it's better because of these reasons. And so you see some communities heading that way, but it's very few. It's just more labor intensive, it's more costly, and that's the hurdle. But,
It certainly is.
yeah.
And the second thing is, has this started to drive any attempts to reduce packaging or anything? I know that during this pandemic, our use of plastic has just shot up because of everything going into individual containers, but
Yeah.
Is there any room at all there?
Exactly the discussion you had about plastics, single serve items during the pandemic has been conversation. I think it's too early to really know what the increase is, but it's intuitive that it has increased. And so back to the legislative function that's happening now. A lot of that focus is to go to the producers and legislate new responsibilities on them in the hopes that they will mitigate or reduce their plastic packaging. That is the primary focus now that I'll just say the public or the governmental function is trying to achieve. Candidly, I'm skeptical. I don't know how Washington, out of one of 50 states and a small place in the world, is going to affect global manufacturers. So that's a big, deep puzzle they've got to solve. But at the end of the day, you're right, that is the solution, to try to reduce the waste before it's ever produced.
Well, the only one that I know of that had success, because Oregon tried it a number of years ago on their own, and that did not work very well. The EU managed to really change, but that's a pretty big market.
Yeah.
When you look at the whole EU. So I think it would take like at least most of the US, if not all of it, to really make a change.
Yeah, I agree with you. It would be federal, and who knows if there's an appetite at the federal level to do it. And the hardest thing is, one, us Americans are pretty independent. And so it's hard to take legislation from somebody else. Number two, it's local facilities, it's local collection to get the material. And so that's one thing that I advocate at the state level is one size really doesn't fit all. And one size particularly doesn't fit Eastern Washington if it comes from the west side. So.
Yeah, because I think it's really important to include transportation costs in the whole transportation costs and transportation impacts in looking at it. So like recycling 10 aluminum cans in Eastern Washington is not probably going to help a whole lot by the time it gets all the way over to where it can be recycled.
And if it's accepted at the recycling site, not shipped to some landfill somewhere.
Exactly.
This is a huge problem, and it's not a consumer end. I don't believe there's a consumer end solution. I think there has to be a producer end solution. Mandate reductions. If you look at how things get packaged, there's a lot of room there. It just has to be dealt with. Yeah. And that's not going to, I agree with you, Derek. It's not going to be at a Washington level. It's going to be at a Washington, D.C. level before that's going to have enough economic impact to major suppliers to change their ways. And who knows when that's going to be.
Do you have a comment or question?
Were you referring to me? You cut out the first part.
Yeah, I was asking if you had a question because your hand's been up.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking a little bit out loud here, but I'd kind of like to see a proposal for initiating some sort of curbside recycling that would be very restricted in scope. Maybe just aluminum and steel cans, or cardboard as well, or just one of those. And I'd be curious to see like what the cost would be associated with starting that program up. I'm not sure if Derek would be the person to propose that, or if you would work with Mike, but I just kind of like to see like maybe a feasibility proposal and just exploration of that as an option.
Yeah, and that actually dovetails in the next topic, and not deciding what council direction is given to myself and to staff. But I can do that relatively easily. The equipment that we had in place has been parked, and so it's still available. I think really the biggest hurdle is going to be educating the community as to, it may not feel the same. In other words, you're not going to fill that can up, but this is why we're doing it. So yeah, if that's council and staff direction toward me, I'm happy to provide a proposal.
Where would those recycled items go?
Well, there is a market, and so we would, it might even be once a month collection. Anyway, let's just say it's a lower collection frequency to help fill the container up. That would save on some cost. And then it would still have to go into Walla Recycling because it's still a manual process to segregate. Let's just say there's 4 items. They would still have to get segregated and then baled separately and shipped separately. And so the infrastructure is there to do it. It's just a lot less volume and certainly a lot, well, it won't be much of a credit, but it'll be a credit. Whereas the prior program with commingled recycling, that's where the negative $154 per ton cost comes in. So it would eliminate the cost and then basically provide a negligible credit. So in essence, it would just be a collection cost minus the commodity value.
Well, that's still in the right direction.
Yeah. So with that, I will go into, and I'll put it here, but this won't be the topic. So tons, residential tons. So again, when we implemented the unlimited collection, we knew from experience that over time, people learn to use it, find the benefits of using it, and surprise, it put out more garbage. And so to recap the history, in 2018, the tonnage went up approximately 10%. Now, more than likely, the vast majority of that increase was the recycled commodity no longer going to the blue bin, it's getting put into the garbage bin. And some of it certainly was the unlimited collection program, but it went up roughly 10%. And without going through the details, literally this year, if you take this year's residential tons and compare it to the tons in 2017, when it was fixed collection or limited collection, those tons have gone up approximately 20%. Now, let me throw another variable in there, and I wish that there was clarity, but we are in a pandemic, and what's happened literally across the country and certainly in our marketplace, as more and more people are working from home, guess what? The garbage at home went up. It peaked at 20-some%, in April after the pandemic started, and it's come down. What we're experiencing is roughly a 15% increase in tons because that's where people are. And so that's compressed the gross margin on the residential. So to summarize again, the data shows that there's roughly 20% more garbage coming from the residential households. And no doubt that's because of 3 factors. The recycle that's getting put into it, adoption of the unlimited collection program, and to some degree, and it's difficult to really measure what this is, but to some degree, COVID, the pandemic has done that. And so what we talked about, and the provisions are in the contract to do a rate study and adjust the rates to accommodate for that increased cost. And so that would be something too that I could work with staff and come up with a timeline. And what I like to do is have a study, we open up our books and present it to staff, present it to a subcommittee of the council, and educate everybody on what the new cost is and adjust for it. So anyway, I wanted to report back, indeed, there's more tons, and I'll leave it to council and their staff to decide how we proceed with that process. And let me throw one more thing too, the flexibility that we put in this contract, let's assume some percentage of it is pandemic related. As soon as the tons migrate back to commercial, as all of us go back to work, well, then it has the flexibility to adjust back down the disposal components. So with that, I will go, if there's no questions, I will go to the rate making part of it, and council's pretty familiar with this. I'm gonna, if everybody can still see the page here, I'm gonna go this page first. So normally there's 2 components that are adjusted. The service component, which is the revenue that Basin Disposal receives, and then the disposal component, which is the component that's passed through our books and paid to the Sudbury landfill. And then this year we have a third one, which is the B&O tax. No doubt a number of you remember that the B&O tax was increased at the state level. And so there's a slight adjustment for that. And so with that, and I won't get into it unless you want to, but we looked at our books and readjusted the percentage of disposal component and collection component. And so the first step is to break those two components out. And then as we break those components out, we increase them by the 2.34%, which is what Sudbury increased their rates. And then the CPI, we know that the inflation market is very mild. That came to 60.64%. And so the revenue the basin gets is adjusted upward 0.64%. And then there's a couple pennies to adjust for the B&O tax. And so for the residential 96 gallon rate, the current rate is 22.08. After those three components are adjusted, it's going to go to 22.43. And then back to this, what that means is the total rate, the total cost structure inside the city went up 1.6% based on those three changes. And then again, here's the summary. Basin goes up by that, Sudbury gets that, and then that's how much the state gets for B&O. So if there's any questions on that. And then I always like to give some real world examples. Again, the residential cart, which we all have at home, 22.08, it goes up to 22.43. And then once we add city utility and state solid waste tax, that's what the consumer is going to see. And likewise for a 4-yard commercial container, this is what that consumer is going to see. And then this is the disposal at Sudbury. Per ton, that's what the consumer is going to see there. And so with that, I will continue to monitor recycling. And if there's any clarity, trust me, I will come back and try to offer it. And likewise, if council direction, but yeah, a question, Council Peterson?
So you're asked of the council. So we really don't know what the percentage is, but let's say I think your first analysis was up about 10%.
Yep.
Pre-plague.
Correct.
And so at this point, you're doing it. You want to come back to a workshop or some environment here where, we've had this discussion many times, but is it safe to say you're eating that 10% at this point?
Yeah, and so I'll revisit some of the stuff I said. One, I move slowly because in this you want to measure and know that you're accurate. So we've got 24 plus months, really heading into 36 months of experience, and so the trend is real. But to answer you directly, yes. And this is what's happening to the whole industry. Candidly, just from COVID, let's focus on COVID. The gross margin on the residential revenue is so compressed that a lot of garbage haulers are not making any money at all, just because of the increased cost in tons. Now, you go to the commercial sector, candidly, we're making good money because nobody's at the commercial business. And so the disposal component has decreased, which increases the gross margin on the commercial. And then on the industrial, which is the construction drop box, that business has fallen off because there's less, it hasn't completely fallen off, but there's less revenue. So on a weighted basis, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep. So on a weighted basis, even though we're making, garbage industry in general is making more money on the commercial sector, it's not enough to overcome the shrinking margin on the residential. And so that's what's going to happen to the industry over time, is no doubt they're going to go back to the communities and say, hey, we need to readjust our rates so we're no longer eating the sector expense.
And, Derek, I think and Mike, I guess, when you say 10%, it'd be nice to quantify that, obviously, and you have to do the work to show that. 10%, I don't know if that's 20 cents a month, per container, or if it's $5 per month, you know what I mean? So
right.
Yeah, obviously it'd be nice to know what your thoughts are on what that dollar impact on per customer would be.
Yeah, and that's what I would do if that's the direction to lay that all out. My main goal is to educate first, and that's what I'm certainly doing.
Thanks, Derek.
Yep, thank you. So with that, I'll monitor the recycling, and then if there's a rate committee to be put together, I will certainly participate in that too. So that's the exciting world of garbage, and always appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you guys.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for being here once again.
Thank you.
We do appreciate getting updated as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Let me
we're
get
going
back
to,
the screen, I think.
oh yeah, Lisa will take it back.
There you go.
Okay, so we're going to move on to public hearings. We do have a public meeting scheduled tonight on the 2021 revenues and property tax levy, and Mr. Carlton will present.
Hello, everybody. I'll just share my screen and bring up the presentation for you. Although it's not sharing.
Derek broke it.
It's just a little slow on the uptake.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, everybody, this is a time of year where we start looking at the components of the budget. The first public hearing we have tonight is our recommendations on the 2021 revenues and the property tax levy. And here's a short presentation to go through where we're at on that. The first page here is, I don't know if you can all see that, but this is the major revenue sources for 2021. It's giving you a history of 2018, 2019, our forecasted amount for 2020, and our proposal for 2021. The key components, you can see a big change in the second line in our retail sales tax. You can see for 2020, we have a considerable increase in our sales tax revenue. That's attributable to two major components, Walmart and Home Depot during the pandemic. And we're anticipating that increase to continue through next year. So that's what we have in a 10% increase to $1.8 million. Other key components, the fuel tax, which is on the fifth line. You saw a reduction in 2020, again, COVID related. We anticipate next year that we're going to, excuse me, get back to more normal levels, and that's resulting in a 16% increase for next year. The water sales revenue number, that 5% is taken off of our rate model. So, you know, we're hoping that, well, that's the amount that's going to come in. So as long as volumes stay the same, that's a reasonable revenue amount. Same for wastewater charges, about 2/3 of the way down. Just let me skip back one to the wastewater utility permits. You can see that, again, a COVID related impact is that utility permits, and as well as the building permits down below, have not readily apparent by the number here, but those took a big hit this year in the development being stopped due to COVID. And we're anticipating those to increase next year. John from the development department, he's gone through and estimated on what our construction is for next year. And those are the numbers that he's put forth. Again, the wastewater charges are 3%. Those are what's included in the rate model, as well as the stormwater, the 3% rate model increase. And then, of course, our building permits will be up more next year due to the expected development. And that's where we're at. Overall, a 13% increase in our total revenues under those key components for next year. There's some other miscellaneous revenues that aren't included in there, but that's the major sources.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the council members for questions or comments, and we're going to start with Mr. Bobbitt.
No questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cleveland.
A bit of a question. Typically, we've tried to take pretty conservative estimates of what the revenue will be. I'm just kind of curious if that's kind of if we're continuing to do that, just being extremely careful about and not jumping too far forward and being too hopeful. So just how conservative versus hopeful have we been with our estimates?
Well, really, there's about 6 key drivers in those numbers. In the property tax, that's the 1% increase that we're allowed by state law, so that seems reasonable. The retail sales tax, the annualized number is actually trending higher than that number through the end of September, so I think that's a realistic number. The water sales, the wastewater, and the stormwater, those are driven from our rate models, and the numbers for the annualized are setting that trend. So that probably constitutes, 75 to 80% of the total revenues identified there. So is it conservative? I think it's reasonable, given where we're at year to date.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes, Brian, if you can share, and if you do not want to, that's fine. It's not appropriate at this time. What is driving the wastewater utility permits to be that high?
And I don't think John's on the call. He'd be, and I don't have that document in front of me. I can provide that at the next council meeting.
I mean, I can provide.
Oh, John.
I can provide it anecdotally. There's a couple of key developments where, especially since investments are driven by that opportunity zone designation, and in talking with these developers and folks, if they don't move on next year, they lose a proportion of that tax credit. So they're really gearing a go. So one of them is the Villages of Fort Walla Walla off of Whitman. They basically put a bid out for a new general contractor that's ongoing now. And then they plan to get going on that. Another one is, I do know they have a Tad Sermon development over on Spitzenberg. They have turned in plans and they're moving forward on that. And then the last iteration of Homestead. So there's a lot of stuff coming together, and for the developments in the Central Park College Place, so the census tract that comprises everything north of Lamperty, that's an opportunity zone, and in order to really garner the full benefit of it, folks who are financing stuff through that need to start doing their thing now. So
sounds good. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, and these development projects, those were in the budget for 2020 as well. So there's a considerable shortfall there. But, John, if those projects go forward, the revenue is going to be there. If they don't go forward, then let's be honest, it's not going to be there. But, at some point you have to realize that project's going to happen and anticipate it in your budget. Because we're also going to have costs associated with those projects that will be in the budget as well. So if you don't have the revenues, you don't have the costs. And so if you don't get the revenues, then you won't have necessarily all the costs. So it's sort of net effect could be close to zero. If you don't get the revenue, you don't have the costs.
Okay, Councilmember Nyhagen.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Selby.
No questions.
Councilmember Sherman.
No questions.
All right, and Councilmember Trope.
No question.
All right. If you have any other questions or you think of something, please raise your hand. And at this time, I will open the floor for public comment.
Mayor, there's
his presentation, I don't believe.
There's about another 12 documents in the presentation.
Oh, I thought you were done. Okay, move
on.
on.
No, sorry. Yeah, we have to get into the property tax levy portion.
I thought it was way too fast. I should have known.
Okay, so just a brief statement here on some of those major sources. Real estate excise tax, EMS levy. These are some of the additional revenues that aren't listed in the prior screen. Again, our utility rate, our utility revenues, which account for a majority of our revenues. We also have loans and bonds revenue that'll be coming in for infrastructure projects, wastewater treatment plant, Southwest Sewer Project. We also have grants on a number of different areas. And then what we have is our property tax amount for next year, which is estimated at just under $2 million. So we can go into some detail on that. We received the valuation, the assessed valuation of all the properties within College Place. There's what they came up with, the valuation we're to use for our tax levy for 2021. There's a new construction component that they come up with at $12 million for a total valuation of $751 plus million of valuation. The prior year was $738,000 or $1 million, a change of just under $14 million. The maximum increase we're allowed by state statute is a 1% increase. Our levy in 2020 was $1.51 million. A proposed 1% increase for, oh, I'm sorry, that should have said 2021. So that should say 2021 at $1.525 million. And that means just a $15,000 increase in the levy for 2021. A component of the levy calculation is the new construction, which as far as the levy results in a $24,000 increase in property taxes based on that $12 million construction valuation. The levy amount calculation, there's the 101% of 2020's amount, or new construction amount, resulting in a 1% increase of $1.551 million. That results in a per $1,000 of assessed value, cost 2.06 and change per $1,000 of assessment. The prior year was 2.0565. So the result is on the bond levy valuation, there's a long-term debt component for one of the city's bond. That bond levy rate per thousand is 0.659 plus change per $1,000. Those combined, if we didn't take a 1% increase, it would be 2.715. With a 1% increase, it's $2.72 per $1,000 of assessed value. So here's a little summary of the amounts. There's the combined amount from 2020. The 2021 combined is stated at just over $2 million, and with a 1% increase, it would be 2.037. Here's a graph showing how our assessed values have changed since 2011. You can see for next year, they're just anticipating a 2.1% increase in the assessed value. Here's the new construction historical trend. You can see that they're anticipating a lower construction season next year at just over $12 million for Walla Walla County. And that's where we stand. One screen I'll stop sharing here. One thing that I didn't show is when you look at the proposed increase results in just $2.01 per $100,000 of assessed value. That's the proposed increase, but we did have some decreases. The CARS bond amount that we have to pay on that debt went down by $1.80 per $100,000. And there was a gain due to the assessed value going up, which results in $1.47 credit. The total combined decrease per 100,000 is $1.26. So that was what we are recommending, to take the 1% increase in the levy. With the increase in assessed value, our homeowners would be saving $1.26 per $100,000 of assessed value. I know that's a lot of information quickly. Do you have any questions?
If you have any questions, please either raise your hand or raise your little virtual blue hand. All right, I don't see any, Mr. Carlton. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
I want to make sure you're done now.
Yes.
All right, so let's see, we do need to open for public comment. It's a public comment and not a hearing. Did anyone submit a comment or arrange to speak?
It is a public hearing.
Oh, it is a public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, so
But
then
no one made arrangements, and we do not have any attendees. So,
okay. So at this time, do we need to close it?
Yes.
Okay, do I need a motion? Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Great, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilmember Selby, this is second.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of closing public comments, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The public comment / hearing period is closed. Okay, we're going to move on to action items. Let's see, first we have the 2021 revenues and property tax levy that Mr. Carlton just presented. So I'm going to go through council members for any additional questions or comments prior to us voting. Any questions or comments, Mr. Bobbitt?
None at this time.
Okay, Mr. Cleveland,
No questions or comments.
Mr. Peterson,
None.
Ms. Nyhagen,
None, thank you.
Ms. Selby,
No questions.
Ms. Sherman,
No questions.
and Mr. Trope.
No questions.
Okay, so let's, if you think of anything, just raise your hand. Is there a motion? Mr. Cleveland,
I will motion to approve resolution number 20-040, which sets the 2021 property tax levy as presented.
okay, thank you. Mr. Peterson,
Second.
okay, thank you. Any additional discussions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, the motion is passed. Thank you. Next item is amendment of CPMC, writing on the sidewalks, and Chief Tamaris is going to present on that.
All right. Good evening, council and mayor. So the ordinance for amending the writing on sidewalk in College Place Municipal Code. The existing code was written in 1986 prior to the sidewalks and roadway improvements to College Avenue and Myra Road. Discussion over improved bicycle access has prompted review of the municipal code. Currently, cyclists cannot ride on sidewalks in the business district, but they can throughout the rest of the city. So we recommend eliminating this and allowing the cyclists to ride on the sidewalks. They will still have to yield to restricted areas and also pedestrian who are on the sidewalks.
Okay, great. We're going to go through council members for questions or comments. Mr. Bobbitt?
No question or comment.
Okay, Mr. Cleveland?
None.
Mr. Peterson?
No questions.
Ms. Selby?
No questions.
Ms. Nyhagen, sorry, I passed you.
None, thank you.
Ms. Sherman?
No questions.
And Mr. Trope?
No question.
All right. Do we have a motion? Mr. Peterson?
I would move to adopt ordinance number 20-017, which amends Paul's Place Municipal Code 10.16.160.
Thank you.
This is Councilmember Selby, I second.
Great, thank you. All those in favor of, actually, is there any other questions or comments before we vote? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The motion is passed. Next item is a public defender contract, and that will be presented by Mr. Rizzatello.
Thank you. This item was introduced at the last meeting, and I received council direction to negotiate under the option of the 200 up to 250 cases per year at the 50,000, because based on our trend level, it looked like we could hedge that bet. We would fall under that, especially with some of the mitigation programs that are going to be in place. So with that, I negotiated with Rachel. It's 250 cases at 50,000 a year. It's definitely fair for the uptick relative to historical trends on the case count. And then also, since she's been a public defender for a while, there's just economies of scale, and then also just a good relationship as well with the various functions of our court through district court to make sure the expenses are kept down there as well. So with that, the staff recommendation is to approve this contract at this rate outlined.
Okay, thank you. We'll go through council members for questions or comments. Mr. Bobbitt,
No questions.
Mr. Cleveland,
No questions.
Mr. Peterson,
No questions.
Ms. Nyhagen,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Selby,
No questions.
Ms. Sherman,
No questions.
Mr. Trope.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
This is Councilmember Selby. I would move to adopt resolution number 20-041, which authorizes the city administrator to sign a contract for, it's cut off, I'm sorry, for legal services.
Second, Councilmember Trope.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were done yet. I couldn't see it either.
It's indigent defense specifically.
For indigent defense services.
Okay.
Second, indigent defense.
So we have a first and a second. Any other discussions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is passed. Thank you. Okay, next item is the November workshop election night schedule conflict, and Ms. Nyso will present that.
Hi, so at our last meeting, we discussed that you guys, the consensus was that you wanted to go ahead and cancel that workshop, and just if we need to start the 10th meeting early, then we'll do that. At this time, it doesn't look like that will be necessary, but I can't say that for sure because I don't know what all is going to come in for the agenda packet. So if that's still the consensus, or do you want to discuss it? It's up to you. It's your meeting.
All right, is there, rather than going through everybody this time around, does anybody have a item for discussion regarding the workshop on election night? Everybody agrees to continue to skip that one?
Yes.
All right, yeah, I think our minds are gonna be focused elsewhere. All right, then do we have a motion?
To skip it. Motion to cancel.
Do we have a motion regarding the workshop November 3rd?
This is Councilmember Selby. I would move to cancel the November 3rd regular workshop and authorize the clerk to schedule the November 10th regular meeting to begin early at 6 or 6:30 p.m. as need is determined once the packet materials are ready.
Second by Councilmember Jerry.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The motion is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding. Okay, next item, fiscal year 2021 state and federal legislative agenda by Mr. Rizzatello.
Hey, thank you. I didn't hear any further comments from City Council on the items on here, so figured put for a vote tonight because that is going to be here very shortly. So the earlier we get ahead of this, the better, frankly, for us. Key thing to note is that the Tim Eyman initiative about the car tabs and so forth, that actually got rejected by the state Supreme Court. So the transportation financial situation on the state level isn't as dire as it once was, because that means that money should be coming in Transportation Improvement Board and so on and so forth. So there's a state agenda and a federal agenda. The state agenda, our key thing is trying to protect and strengthen the pass-through state grant agencies. A lot of the capital projects through the years here have been funded by them. So TIB, Public Works Trust Fund, RCO, they're going to fund a lion's share Lions Park. So very important to us. Also CURB. Also looking at additional financial tools for streets, even though that did get rejected this go around by the Supreme Court, that still is a dicey subject matter, and relative to other states, there aren't really mechanisms in place for dealing with the finances of streets, local ones. Also trying to push economic development incentives. We're the only state in the country that lacks that. Multifamily property tax exemption, also US 12 phase 8. Phase 7, if you've started to drive out toward Tri-Cities, they actually have equipment staged where they're starting to do a construction work on phase 7, but phase 8 is that last gap from 9 Mile Hill over to the paper plant in Wallula, and then also the alternate compliance paths for PCBs. General government, basically language pertaining to public records, annual growth rate to inflationary index rather than 1% on property tax, fund resources for childcare and youth rec activities, especially as a result of needs arisen from COVID-19 mandates. One thing that has been added, this has been by request of building department, is delaying implementation of the 2018 state building code. Currently, building codes are basically adopted on 3-year increments, and this 18 one that's going to be coming out soon has a lot of really restrictive language pertaining to electrical and seismic. And the thing is because of COVID, the state hasn't done any of the trainings really at all for the development community or the building inspectors. So this thing is supposed to basically just become the law of the land in the spring. And if that's the case, I would argue that's why we're starting to see a rush on building permits, because technically if you get your building permit filed, it is like grandfathered for a bit under the old building code. But there needs to be dialogue about this though at the state level, because if they want folks to essentially adhere to stuff and then enforce it, they need to provide the appropriate trainings to everyone. Also maintaining MRSC. A lot of our research is done through there. And once again, the state's threatening that as usual, taking away funding from that. Supporting defending local control and against unfunded mandates. Public safety, it's trying to support local control over city law enforcement policy decisions. There's some 600 law enforcement bills right now floating around Olympia already. We aren't in a legislative session yet. So putting language in there. Also funding for the Law Enforcement Academy. There's always too few of classes on that. Also appropriate funding for mental health. And then improve reimbursement process for state mobilization. That's really important because we do get requests from time to time to help on fires like in California. And what we learned the last time is that if we help with fires in Oregon, Washington, reimbursement is through basically state emergency management, and they're very timely. The problem is, with the California case, for some reason, reimbursement goes through the military department of the state, and they aren't in a hurry to get the money to agencies that need it. So you could be carrying a significant amount of money on the books for like 9 months. A couple of years ago when we sent volunteers to help out in California, that happened. We eventually did get the money due to us, but that is a burden for small cities such as ours. Also supporting AWC legislative agenda. There's handouts in the agenda packet. A lot of it just has further explanations on the points I already made. Our priorities in that legislative document is basically wastewater treatment plan. It's a ton of money. So the general gist of that, since to fix the treatment plants over $20 million, is to give us grant money and all the aid possible, or they need to work with us more as far as the timelines, because they are quite restrictive. Lions Park, we have that in there just for additional monies for $2 million. We're well on our way to rehabbing that. We scored well on 2 of the RCO grants. We have our REAP 2 match funds. The only part where we need to close the gap, and we're going around to community groups and so forth, is like the softball field, because we didn't score high enough on the softball field grant. So we likely will need help on that, but we're looking good for Lions Park. Also storm decant facility, and then improvements around Southwest College Place, such as Southwest Sewer, Majania Road reconstruction, which we got some MPO funds for, and then regional park development. And the federal one, a lot of it's the same thing. Key thing is trying to encourage the feds to come up with assistance for revenue shortfalls due to COVID-19. Also trying to enhance CDBG so it's easier to utilize. Same thing with the opportunity zone. It does provide an opportunity, but a lot of the developers are just very perplexed about it. And I would say it's actually shortchanging what could be a lot of development. I mean, we're doing good for the size of our community, but we could do a lot better if it was put more straightforward from the federal government. Also trying to deal with the challenges brought with the local recycling programs and the Chinese National Sword policy, and then funding for a U.S. Forest Service for wildland firefighting capacity. So those are 2 legislative agendas that are before you this evening for approval.
All right, let's go through the council members for questions or comments, and we'll start with you, Mr. Bobbitt.
No questions.
Okay, Mr. Cleveland,
No questions.
Mr. Peterson,
No questions. Thanks, Mike, for keeping us updated on this.
Councilmember Nyhagen,
No questions. Thanks, Mike.
Ms. Selby,
No questions.
Ms. Sherman,
No questions, but thanks, Mike.
and Mr. Trope.
Mike, great job. I think the priorities are right in line with what we've discussed. No further questions or comment.
Okay, great. Please use the button to raise your hand if you do have any other questions or comments. But for now, do we have a motion regarding the legislative agenda? Anybody would like to make a motion? Councilmember Sherman,
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 20, am I in the right one? Yeah, 20-042, which adopts the fiscal year 2021 City of College Place state and federal legislative agendas.
great, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Are there any other additional comments? Okay, seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is passed. Thank you very much, Mike. You throw a lot into that little bit of document, so thank you. Okay, the last action item is award of the Urban Forestry Management Plan, and Mr. Rizzatello is also going to present on this.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So this was by competitive RFP. So earlier this year, we were awarded grant dollars, about $19,000 from the State Department of Natural Resources. We're able to get this grant because for the last couple of years, we were recognized as a tree city by the Arbor Day Foundation. So you get access to additional grant opportunities such as this. We put in a grant to basically locate trees in city parks and then in the right of way of federally classified roads. So that's like collector roads like 12th Street, College Avenue, Larch, 4th. Reason we did it that way is because we were going to go after a second grant to do a local roads. That was that resolution of support you all approved last meeting. So with this, we had intern locate trees. We partnered with the arborist for City of Walla Walla, Kyle Clemens, on his own time. Contracted us to essentially identify the said trees. And then in this case, this proposal was to contract with an arborist firm to do a urban forestry management plan, master plan for our city park trees, and then federally classified roadway, right-of-way street trees. So a couple folks bid on this, about 4 community forestry consultants. They were ranked the top one under what the grant is for. So their proposals for $18,000, grant was for $19,000. And this would be the first urban forestry management master plan that's been done to my knowledge in the city here. It's estimated to take about 6 months to complete. Also, the Park Arbor and Rec Board, they recommended approval of this. So that's what I have.
All right, great, thank you. So let's go through council for questions or comments, starting with Mr. Bobbitt.
No questions.
Mr. Cleveland? Mr. Peterson?
No questions.
Ms. Nyhagen?
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Selby?
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Sherman?
No questions.
And Mr. Trope?
No questions.
Okay, then if there's no questions or comments, if you do have any, raise your hand. But for now, do we have a motion regarding the urban forestry management plan? Mr. Peterson?
I would move to adopt resolution number 20-043, which permits the city administrator to sign a contract with community forestry consultants to create an urban forestry management plan for city park and federally classified roadway street trees.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Toth. We have a first and a second. Any other questions or comments before voting? All right, seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The motion is passed. Thank you, Mr. Rizzatello. All right, we're going to move on to section 6, administrative reports. And the first one's going to be from Mr. Carlton regarding the draft preliminary 2021 budget.
Yes, we're required by RCW to submit a preliminary budget and budget message 60 days prior to the end of the beginning of the next year. Attached, you hopefully have reviewed. There's two components, or actually three components that are attached. The first is the budget message prepared by Mike and the mayor, which I won't read in detail, but you can go through and read the highlights there. The second attachment is the preliminary budget summary. So this is, we presented some preliminary numbers at the workshop last month. This is the next iteration of the 2021 budget. A little more details are provided. There's more information on the capital projects have been added and carried through. The revenues, which was presented earlier, are adopted in this budget. The revenues and expenditures, we've gone through detail with each department and reviewed their asks for the year. And this is a summary of where we're at. I would say we're at probably about a 90% budget number. Some of the key components here, you'll notice that in the current expense fund, we are close to a balanced budget for the year. One thing I would like to bring to your attention is in prior budget cycles, I know the budget was presented in a method that I didn't prefer, but it's what you approved the budget on. And what it was is it took the beginning balance and the revenues and added them together to come up with a total revenues. Then it added the expenditures and the ending balance to come up with a total expenditure. In my point of view, that can be a little deceiving because it doesn't show where you're at on one particular year in relation to revenues and expenditures. So if you have a surplus or a deficit within the funds, it kind of got hidden in the total revenue, total expenditure side. And although it looked like it balanced, it doesn't really show you the entire picture per fund. This setup is showing you where we're at on the year-to-year basis in relation to revenues and expenditures just for that year, and then including the opening fund balance and the ending fund balance. So you can see I'll touch on some of the major ones here. The first one, the current expense, you can see that right now we're pretty close to a balanced budget for the year. And that 1.92 million ending balance keeps us in compliance with our required fund balances. I didn't prepare a slide with those numbers on it because we're still in figuring out where our exact numbers are going to be on the budget, but I know just under $2 million keeps us in compliance. You can see there's a few down. You go down to Fund 306, which is our REIT fund. You can see there's a considerable deficit next year. That was totally anticipated. That is the Lions Park project, which we've been accumulating funds in that for a number of years. I think it's for the last couple of years.
Since it was created in 2017.
Thanks, Mike. So that money's been accumulating for that project. So that drawdown is anticipated. Those funds were being accumulated for that project. So of the $1.1 million in deficit on the bottom, you can see 40% of that is on that one project. we have a lot, you go down to Fund 311, the Street Improvement Fund. We have a number of projects for the streets planned for next year. There is close to, there's close to $2.3 million in projects slated next year under the street improvements. That portion would be the portion that's required by the city net of grants. So, you know, that's a considerable reduction in that fund balance, but that's the portion we have to pay to get those projects completed. You can go down to Fund 410, Capital Reserves. That's for our wells project, and that'll be our portion that are required to be paid out of our reserves to complete the 2 well projects. I mean, one of them will be completed next year, but we're anticipating the additional well project for next year. The next one down, 411, you can see the wastewater has a large deficit of 380,000. That's the Southwest Sewer Project. We're required by USDA to commit just over $500,000 to that project out of our own reserves. So that's included in that fund for 2021. There's a few funds on there: the Technology Reserve, the Equipment Reserve Fund, and the Equipment Rental, all internal funds for our projects. And we have to look at those individually to make sure that we're doing the right amount of interfund transfer between the other funds to balance out those. So we're still at about a 90% level on getting that. The areas that we have to hit again are the interfund transfers. We have to make sure those are correct and tie out all the funds, so we're allocating everything appropriately. And Desharee and I are going to go through a line-by-line review and make sure everything is as it should be. Now we have the next presentation will be on the 24th of November council meeting, and we'll have the detailed presentation ready for that meeting. The last attachment is the detail of the budget, and you're welcome to review that at your leisure if you can read it. That is a report produced out of our new Questica budget program.
Well, just a little light reading in our spare time.
Yeah, and there's
But it looks good.
if you have questions, we'll have a lot more detail in the presentation next month.
Okay.
Is there any questions at this point?
All right, let's move on for questions and comments for the council, starting with Mr. Bobbitt.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Cleveland,
Questions?
Mr. Peterson,
No questions.
Ms. Nyhagen. I'm sorry, Ms. Nyhagen, any questions?
They're muted.
I was muted. I'm sorry. None, thank you.
Okay, that's okay. Ms. Selby,
No questions.
Ms. Sherman,
No questions, and I'm not going to read that detail to you.
And just one more comment. I know Mike's got the next part on the capital facility plans and the equipment and IT. That total is $17.578 million. And that total amount is currently incorporated into the budget, along with all the associated revenue streams, grants, all the different funding components.
okay, okay. Well, and anything, Mr. Choate?
No questions.
Okay. Then we're going to move on. Yes, Ms. Sherman?
I have one more thing. I did want to say thank you. This format has been great because I can search it unlike prior years. So thank you very much.
Nice.
That really does make a big difference. I remember that coming up last year. All right, so let's move on to the capital facilities plan with Mr. Rizzatello.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So this is once again going over a capital facility plan. I definitely learned from previous years. If you want to look at the booklet, please do so over the coming weeks. I'm not going to read it verbatim. They'll put everyone to sleep. This basically the thing to look at with the capital facility plan is the mid-October rendition document, the 6-year plan. It has like a summary, and you'll see it all color coded by what's occurring, what isn't. So administration, community development, nothing going on next year for capital improvements. Fire department, we're starting a contribution for the training tower, and then also dealing with some staircase issues that really need to be fixed up, and then the HVAC issue in fire. Likewise, police department has a HVAC issue with their basically at the north unit. Really, it should have been fixed this year, but we try to hold out a year, so that'll be going next year. Public Works Parks. We moved other projects years out because it's just all hands on deck to get Lions Park done correctly in the right way with everything done. So it's done once and for all. So as far as like those drawdowns that Brian alluded to, really that's what you're seeing. There's a bunch of, I would say, generational projects occurring next year, which is exciting, but it also accounts for deviations you're seeing in money. So parks, that's scheduled at $2 million. Going into stormwater, there's a couple there. Outfall replacement program, there's a bunch of outfalls on that hill above Lions Park. So it makes sense that we do all the outfall work while Lions Park is ripped up. So that's about 100,000, 20,000 in outfall. So retrofitting those. Also, change from previous renditions of this, we started to get some new information about Destito and Earl, because there's a crushed stormwater pipe on Destito, and Earl just has ponding issues, but Destito's a priority. At first we thought it could be dealt with in other manners, but Ecology's insisting on some treatment, and Paul could allude to it in more depth. I just know because of the treatment method, there's additional cost to it. So the idea is to split the Destito Earl project into two, since it costs quite a bit more. So Destito's the critical one, because right now there's water going nearing in people's basements because of the line that has issues. So that would be 100,000. And then the following year would be Earl. Earl is not compromising anyone's homes. It's just it's a ponding issue out in the street. So Earl is not as critical as Destito. Destito is a critical path project. So that's stormwater. Streets. There's quite a few projects in there. A lot of it is spending grants we have and then the associated match money. So Ford Bikes, which was putting in the continuance of the cycle track down forth from Davis to College. And then the big thing is putting in pedestrian street lamps like College Avenue, so that way students feel safe and all pedestrians and bicyclists feel safe. That's going down next year. Engineering has been occurring this year. Meadowbrook grind and overlay, that was supposed to occur this year. The issue with that was that when the Iman initiative passed, coupled with all of the COVID situation, TIB, they ordered that all projects currently not under construction freeze. Since that juncture, they have ordered them be unfrozen. So Meadowbrook, that can be slated to go forth next year. Whitman Larch stop sign, putting the flashy stop signs on Larch, similar to what we did at 12th and Larch. That cost will be borne by that developer, Villages of Fort Walla Walla. That's why it got delayed a year. We shouldn't have to pay for it. Really, what's going to bring it to a precipice is that newer developments that should be borne by the developer. Safe Walk College Place, that's constructing the sidewalks. We did engineering this year. However, when you spend federal pass-through grant money, the environmental work is really excruciating and it takes really long. So in waiting for that, that basically blew the construction season this year. So we have the plans and we will construct that in spring next year. And that's along Davis, Bathe, and 12th, and it's grant funded. Other things, chip seal, large chip seal program next year. So covering the Bade neighborhood and Southwest 11th, 10th, and Puff Lane. So a lot of work going on there. And then block resurfacing program, made a decision here to try and memorialize this, where we put away some money each year to do a block of roadway, resurface it. So since I've been here, there have been random one-off projects that have required that, such as, for instance, Broadway from 12th Street up to Mountain View Scenic View area. And then when we extended some of the improvement work on Damson from like C Street to Cargill. So to me, it made sense where instead of having to deal with it as one-off, we should really make it a program and then plan for it. And I work, since that program, the folks drove the streets and then ranked roads appropriately, we now have hard data by which to proactively plan our road improvements. That's what fed into that. So that's what that 30,000 is for. And we would replicate funds for that every year. So that way it's no longer these one-offs. We can plan for it appropriately. Then next, going into wastewater on page 6, a lot of projects going in, expensive ones. Southwest Sewer, luckily we got USDA money, port money, ecology money, but it's a high dollar ticket item. It's north of $7.5 million, and it's replacing that outdated lift station. With the ecology funds, we're also dealing with engineering work on the wastewater treatment plant. So that's going on next year. And then also moving on our neighborhood sewer lining program. Every year we set aside money for that. So that's what's going on in wastewater. And you can see the areas we're going to prioritize year to year under that fact sheet. Then we go underwater. Relative to past years, things are starting to calm down there. Well number 4, which was formerly well number 1, that's actually done, where it's pumping water and all is good there. So that's why that's no longer on the CFP list. However, well number 2, well number 6, that one, the well house needs to still be constructed. The engineering plans, it's moving through ecology right now, but the well house, all mechanics and so forth, that needs to be put in next year. And that's being covered by a combo of the DWSRF funds and legislative appropriations and water utility money. Again, those wells last like 50 or more years, so it's a generational project. So that gives you a flavor of what's going on. You look at the grand total. I mean, over the next like 6 years, the need out there is about 80 million. Now, lion's share, a good portion of that we put in there in case development comes. So like, for instance, at West Martin Airfield storage tank, that's not happening unless something happens out at Martin Airfield, and that would be borne by the developer. But it's important to have it in here so that way as grant opportunities arise, we can act on them. So that is the CFP.
All right. I don't know about you all, but I'm exhausted. Let's go through council for any questions or comments, starting with Mr. Bobbitt.
No questions.
Mr. Cleveland,
No questions.
Mr. Peterson,
No questions.
Ms. Nyhagen,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Selby?
One quick comment. One of our students is working on a preliminary design for a project that's a number of years down the road. And one of the questions they got was, why are you working on this street when there's other streets that need it more? And so I think it might be helpful to remember as we put out these budgets and stuff to kind of do some educating on, you know, the life cycle of a project, and the fact that somebody's doing a preliminary design does not mean we're going to have trucks out there next summer.
I could put information a little more forthcoming. It is actually in the long booklet. If you go in that PowerPoint, it's like a 76-page book. There's language in there in the summary.
Yeah, and I think it's good. I mean, you've always been good about saying, well, you know, we're also, if we take advantage of opportunities. So if somebody comes up with a great grant program and we have a street that fixes it, will, or that meets it, we'll jump on that just to get the free money. But so just a little explanation of how we prioritize and how, you know, the money can make things jump the line a little bit, but does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to Ms. Sherman
No questions.
and Mr. Trope.
No question.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the equipment replacement plan. Did you get enough time to breathe, Mike?
Yeah.
You're on.
So with this, there's two documents. One is this budget book. The other one, which I'll read from, is the summary. Summary just has essentially green is the ones that are budgeted that we're working towards. The orange ones are ones that are planned. So I'll just go over the ones that are slated for next year. If you want to see details such as what percentage of what budget's paying for what, the need, it's all in that long form book, PowerPoint booklet I put out that's in there. So administration, city hall generator, dealing with that because the existing one only runs one outlet and that's not appropriate. So right now we're doing a little bit of a study right now to see if we can repurpose a generator on one of the defunct wells to run city hall, but that remains to be seen. So I'm putting that as a placeholder in case. Fire department turnouts, that's a standard thing every year. Also doing some leases on the fire marshal and fire captain vehicle, and then SCBA replacement, the air packs. We always proactively replace those proportionally, so that way it doesn't all hit us in 1 year. And then also, because our firefighters are very busy on wildland season this year, so there's funds from that, a replacement wildland unit because they have older units to do that, and us replacing that's usually contingent and revenues come in from wildland. And I mean, as you've heard in the news and just with emails I've shared, yeah, they were busy this year with all the fires going on. Police department continuing the leasing program. Other change from earlier iterations is taser replacement because some of our tasers are getting out of date where they're no longer supported. So we need to fix that. We're able to get a break on it by packaging it with body cameras. It's the same company, it dabbles with both. So we're able to get like a better rate on that. So that's PD. Parks, nothing there for equipment. Stormwater, same thing. Streets, there's a pickup, there's a Stellar truck replacement, and then the big ticket item, because Paul and Jeff did a great job limping this thing along many years it's been around, but it's at the end of its life is the grader. So we use that to maintain alleys and then also help with plow removal. It's from 1976 and it's in dire need of replacement. So we need to replace it. They got it to limp along this year, but does not look good for future years. So we need to get on that. Wastewater, just the contract addendum. They've taken on all the equipment that I would argue that saved us cost because like for instance, they had a Vector over there. So when they bought their own equipment, we were able to repurpose the old one as the stormwater Vector, and that's going to buy us a couple of years from having to get a new one. And then water, just a vehicle pickup replacement there. So as you can see, that's the totality of things. For next year, about 902,000. 6 years, it's $5.5 million. Really a lot. The department has quite a bit of the dollar ticket items associated to that is the fire department. Fire vehicles are very expensive. The one thing where we are going to have dialogue about either leasing down the line through USDA or partnering with the university is in a couple of years replacement fire vehicle because they do have higher rise buildings over there, but currently we don't have a ladder truck. We have the conventional fire equipment, but no ladder truck, even though we have higher rise structures. So there is a bit of increase there, trying to take into account that when we do replace the fire truck, we're going to try to do our best to be able to afford some sort of ladder truck. We'll have to see how the market is at that juncture, and that's something I'm talking with the chief about, and then we'll start having conversations with the university about, but that gives you a flavor for the equipment replacement plan.
All right, let's go through council for questions or comments. Mr. Bobbitt,
No questions. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Mr. Cleveland,
No questions.
Mr. Peterson,
No questions. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Ms. Nyhagen,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Selby,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Sherman,
No question.
Mr. Trope. Oh, you're on mute, so no questions, Mr. Trope?
No questions. I'm sorry. I thought I had unmuted.
Okay, that's all right. I just wanted to make sure I was reading your lips correctly. All right, so then let's move on to the information technology plan.
Information technology plan, again, I put out booklets for all of this, so you can look at the IT booklet if you really want to know the details about everything. But if you just want the overarching summary, go to the summary document. We have made great strides the past years and actually catching up, which is nice finally. And then also we were able to utilize that state COVID grant to start working toward automating functions. Like what I work, we're going to work toward having like online permitting. With that, we're now starting to get to a point where with a lot of the software having to incur that initial high cost of getting it, we're past that point where now it's like the annual software maintenance costs. So a lot of this is software maintenance. So next year, some of what we're going to try to do is trying to deal with the council chambers with the AV system and video walls. That's something that John has talked about in the past. We're going to make a run at that. Then other things, computers, we're on the last year of playing catch up. We're after next year, it's going to be more predictable as far as the computer replacement plan across the city for 7 years. And then, yeah, software maintenance on Viper, which I've been very impressed with that with other cities where they've had their server taken over and being extorted for money and so forth. We've not had that situation, knock on wood, but it works good. Then other things, Questica, working on that. Archive social, so it documents our social media, board docs, just the conventional stuff we've been doing over the years. Community development, again, software maintenance and that online permitting portal. I would expect that will go live by the end of the year. It just takes it takes work to get all this stuff primed for the public to use. And then the short-term vacation rental, that's going. And then software maintenance and SurveyMonkey. Fire department, again, pretty conventional from how it's been in years past. Police department, going there. The big thing we're working on for next year is the whole body cameras. We're in negotiations with the union, but frontline workers, they've seemed to be in support of it, and a lot of agencies are going towards this. So we're gonna make a run at getting that, and then combining it with the taser package because it dramatically lowers cost. And then computer, and then server replacement. This was in the IT budget last year, and this isn't our server, it's the shared 911 server with the county and the city. That should have been replaced this year. City of Walla Walla made the decision to punt out replacement a year. Now it really needs to be replaced. So we have to come up with our share for the 911 replacement for the server. And then Public Works, again, just proactively fix computer replacement. iWork, we use that for asset management now, and then also way better backflow software where it's going to fix an issue we had with the previous backflow provider, and then software maintenance for Esri. So with that, that gives you a flavor of the expense for the IT, but we're moving toward a phase now where we're making improvements, I would say, on IT capital, such as like the AV stuff for council chambers, but a lot of the things that we're playing catch up on, like computers and trying to get software, so that way we could mitigate having to add more staff. We're getting there now where it's just software maintenance. So that's what I have for this.
All right. Let's go through council, starting with Mr. Bobbitt. Any questions or comments?
Not at this time.
Okay, Mr. Cleveland,
No questions.
last chance. All right, Mr. Peterson.
You caught my attention there when I thought I heard summer rental costs, but I misheard it. I think it was server rental.
No.
No, other than that, no questions. Thanks, Mike.
Ms. Nyhagen,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Selby.
Questions?
All right, Ms. Sherman
No questions.
and Mr. Trope.
No question.
Goodness, all right. So we're now on to number 7, which is informational reports. So there's department reports in your package for you to review on your own time. So, is there any other business for the good of the order?
I'd like to say something, Councilwoman Nyhagen.
Yes, please do.
I'd like for us to pray for our country that God's will be done on Tuesday. Please pray for our country.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Anything else? All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Do we have a second? Okay. I think I heard a second.
Yes, Councilmember Selby.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Selby. If there's no objections, then the meeting is adjourned at 8:43 p.m. Have a good night, everybody.
Night.
That night.
Good night.
Stay healthy.